Hey, this is Mark Henry, author of Dancing with Energy, Healing Magic, and Mysticism, here to talk to you more about the occult and the paranormal. Well, today I'm going to be talking about Jung, Freud, and the occult. So this is for you psychology geeks, those interested in the mind and who want to know kind of the backstory and even kind of the tea behind one of the early forefathers of psychology. Before I begin, I just wanted to mention that I just released an attunement in my attunement store on Etsy. And this is a new type of attunement. This is the attunement to the Om chant, the Om energy. And that is a special attunement that connects you to the energy of divine creation to enhance peace and harmony. Om is usually a chant used during meditation to achieve these things. So if you want to connect with that energy, if you feel like that is right for you, then check out my attunement store. I'll put a link in the description, and I will have other sacred sounds like Om as attunements in the near future. So let's get started with today's video. All right, so Jung, Freud, and the occult. First of all, I want to kind of give you my background and my connection to this. I became introduced to Carl Jung as a high school student in psychology. And I thought that some of his ideas were very interesting. Ideas like the archetypes and the collective unconscious and all these sorts of things really fascinated me. And then I went to college and majored in religious studies. And I started taking psychology too, and found that Carl Jung was more present in religious studies, psychological theories of religion, than it was per se in psychology itself. And then I became friends with a professor who told me, hey, you need to go to this group. It's the Carl Jung Society, and you'll learn more in-depth information about this and his works. So I said, okay, cool, I'll do that. And since then, I've been kind of coming back and forth with it. So I find him extremely interesting and fascinating, and I hope that you do too. All right, so Carl Jung, born in 1875. He was born to a Swiss pastor, and his mother was a spiritualist. Now, if you watch my videos, you might have come across videos where I talk about spiritualism. And spiritualism is a particular religion that works towards self-enhancement and enlightenment through communication with departed spirits and guides, essentially. So, Carl Jung's mother, Emile Preswart, was a medium, a trance medium. So she would go and talk to the dead, and this was, spiritualism, by the way, was real popular at this time in the country. This is post-Civil War, and at that time, with so many people dying, this became sort of a movement, and this kind of idea took hold, this version of communication. So she was doing this, and that became kind of part of his childhood growing up. It became nothing unusual for mom to be doing this and participating in seances and that sort of thing. And he also, on that side, he had a cousin, Helene Priceword, who we should call Helly. Now, Helly was also a medium, and he would see her, and she would be speaking in different voices based on who it was coming through. He participated in seances with her. So he started to, this was just part of his background. It was kind of part of his normal life. You know, one with his mother and one with his niece, Helene. So it got him thinking, you know. He was a good student. He went to medical school, and at that time, if you wanted to become a researcher and a professor, then you can get your PhD. So he did a PhD dissertation on Hellene, spiritualism, other aspects of the occult. His dissertation was called On the Psychology and Pathology of So-Called Occult Phenomena. So he was really making no judgment about whether this was true or not. He was, at that point at least, he was really looking at the psychological aspects of what may be going on with the people who are the mediums. Okay, so we're going to fast forward a little bit to his next thing, and that is he, in his life, became interested in divination. So he experimented with astrology, tarot, and the I Ching. Now, to explain what he thought about these things, I have to tell you about two major concepts in Jungian psychology, and that is synchronicity. Synchronicity is, and that's different than syncretism, so make sure not to get those terms mixed up. Synchronicity is what he called an acausal connecting principle. Acausal mean that there are two things maybe linking or connecting that are not causally, there's no causal relationship between them. So, and he considered these synchronicities to be meaningful coincidences. And coincidences, probably lighter, I'm using, it's lack of a better word, coincidences. So two events happening, one doesn't seem to cause the other, but they have some sort of meaning with the person that has it. And so their second part of this is that he had the idea of the collective unconscious. There is the personal unconscious, which is what the memories and things that we have stored through our lives that may be not in our present awareness, but something can trigger it. It could be a thought, it could be a thought, feeling in the unconscious, an idea that comes forth. It would be like, let's say you're trying to remember something but can't. Well, it's back there in your unconscious mind, and you can't recall at that time, but you say to yourself, hey, I'll remember this in a second. And then within a few minutes, it pops up. It pops up from somewhere. It wasn't in your present conscious mind, but it was back there. So that is the unconscious. Now he had the idea of a collective unconscious, which goes even deeper than that. This is the unconscious of all of humanity as a human species. It is within this collective unconscious are things called archetypes, which are important and powerful ideas and themes that run through our species. They are things that will show up in literature, myths, they'll show up in our lives. This could be, an example might be the hero archetype. So think of the Lord of the Rings, the villain archetype. Just think about any movie where there is a villain, and a lot of times the villains are even more interesting than the heroes. The Joker, for example. There are these types of things that Jung believed that, on one hand, they kind of are coming through us through our psychology. On the other hand, he believed that they act on the world itself in an autonomous way. So if you are somebody who believes in evil, for example, it's an archetype, but it's also, some people consider it a force, a present force. That's what he's talking about. It can be both. So as we talk about these things, getting back to divination, had to go through a kind of a side story to talk about those things. But in regard to divination, he experimented again with the astrology, I Ching, and the tarot. He believed the tarot, and if you are familiar with the tarot and the major arcana, you can think of those as the archetypes of that particular system. I've done videos with this about this on this channel. So we're thinking about the world, the sun, the Hierophant, the High Priestess, all of these themes, all of these ideas, he considered to be the archetypes of that particular system. So that when we as humans engage in this tarot, that we are engaging with these archetypes and we are using them, and they are coming forth and giving us information. How are they giving this information? Well, if you're a tarot reader, what you do is you think of a question, you're setting the intention to do the tarot, you shuffle the cards, you put the cards out, and they fall where they must. And then based on these major arcana and the minor arcana, it will tell a story about what's going on related to your question. So that is what he thought about the tarot. He believed that the tarot was certainly real, and just like we're talking about the archetypes acting on the world, having a little bit of autonomy, that there is something to these cards falling in the right way at the right time, which he considered synchronicity. Okay, so that's the tarot. So he also experimented with the I Ching. The I Ching is a Chinese fortune-telling system where you throw these, I think they're called stalks, and you throw them down, and how they fall and the relationships determine what your fortune is. And he would do it, and he actually had to stop because it became too uncanny. He felt like it got actually too much information, and it actually scared him a little. So he backed off of the I Ching, and then finally, he was engaged in astrology. And there was at one point where he would actually go and do astrological readings to get some background information on the clients. So what is in the Western astrology? You have all of the 12 signs: Leo, Virgo, Sagittarius, all of these types of things that have a certain meaning, which are considered, again, archetypes of those things, those animals or ideas that are present in that particular system. So he believed that these things are important and that they are real, and that at the same time they have a psychological and I guess you would think of the collective unconscious and archetypes as almost like a psycho-metaphysical connection. It's somewhere in between. Now, one of the last things he was into and thought about was UFOs. Or is it unseen aerial phenomena now? I believe that's a new term. He actually wrote a book. It's called On Flying Saucers, Modern Myth of Things in the Sky. So he was very interested in UFOs because he believed that we had ancient myths. We had the Norse myths. We had the Greek myths that talked about Greek Hera, Athena, all of those gods and goddesses, and that was their thing in the past, the ancient past. People even claimed to see the gods. Some people back then in our past have claimed to see the dragons and all those things that are part of those myths. He said, now we are seeing something different. No one sees those gods like they did before. What we're seeing is other things in the sky. We are seeing unidentified aircraft. They called it flying saucers back then. That was just kind of the term back in the 40s and 50s and things like that. But he said, it's kind of curious that when our technology developed in electronics and we're building things, that all of a sudden the new myth are coming out that is technological. He says they didn't feel like that was that wasn't something that was a coincidence. That is part of our shift towards looking at the spiritual and looking at the divine and all those sorts of things. And what are supposedly in these UFOs? These mysterious creatures. He probably would say the fact that most of the time when UFOs are recorded, it is recorded or seen by a human. But there's very few recordings of house cameras seeing UFOs where there is not someone present. There's something about our presence there that is connected with this UFO. He kind of alluded to the fact that, this is part of us. This is part of our collective unconscious, and this is an archetype. And it doesn't mean that they're not real in a physical sense, but it is a very curious phenomenon that, okay, even when we see them, they don't leave much, if any, physical evidence. It's almost like sometimes they can just disappear, right, in thin air. So anyway, this is kind of what he was kind of thinking about and struggling with as far as the UFO phenomena is concerned. I want to leave you with a story, especially if you are, like I said, a psychology geek like me. Jung actually had a friendship, a relationship with Sigmund Freud. They hit it off really quick after meeting, and they would write letters, and they would meet up sometimes and talk about psychoanalysis, which was the psychotherapy that was really popular back then, and they were both a part of. They were part of committees and all sorts of things, and they were, at that time, the psychoanalytic movement was creating journals and books and all that. So in any case, as part of their friendship, they were meeting one day, and one of the, I guess, disagreements that Freud and Jung had was on the paranormal. So they were discussing this one day, and Jung, they were discussing it in Freud's study. There was a bookcase. And correct me if I'm wrong, if you're more of a psychology geek than I am as far as the exact details of it's a bookcase or a table. But in any case, I think it was a bookcase. As they were talking and discussing about the paranormal, Jung was saying, sometimes that when something really unexpected happens or unusual that could be considered something paranormal, I in my torso, I feel a lot of heat and it gets tight, and then something happens. And Freud kind of just brushed it off. Now, as part of this conversation, a few seconds later, there was a loud bang, like a crash. And they looked over, and it was coming in the direction of the bookcase. And Jung felt that feeling that he just said. He says, you know what? That's going to happen again in a few seconds. And Freud was like, no, that's pure bosh, as they said in the German. And sure enough, that the loud crash happened again, and Freud got completely frightened by it, and they just he didn't want to talk about it anymore, never again. And then, of course, they broke off their friendship. That was one of their disagreements, but it was other reasons too. So any case, one thing I forgot to say in the beginning. Okay, I'm going to put a link in the description for those attunements. It is my birthday weekend, so I am going to give a little bit of a discount for the attunements in order to, I guess, share my birthday happiness and my generosity. So I'm going to do that, and again, I have a new attunement, so check that out, and I will talk to you all soon. All right, take care. Bye-bye.